Hello, this is Kevin Benedict, Independent Mobility Analyst and SAP Mentor Volunteer. Thank you for joining me today for this video comments and an interview with Neil McHugh from Sky Technologies. He's the Vice President of Sales and Business Development. Thank you for joining me today, Neil.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me.
Now, I have a number of questions I just want to go through and ask you, and we can discuss these for the audience. So the first question I want to ask you is, what are some of the biggest challenges you see in mobility today, Neil?
Okay. I think probably the biggest challenge I see is from the customer's viewpoint, where there's so many different alternatives and solution options for mobility, which is good, but also can cause some confusion. And mobility, as you know, is extremely critical to the competitive strategy of any large customer who wants to improve their efficiencies and their operational costs.
Yeah.
And with so many options, we're concerned that some of the customers may fall for the marketing hype, promoted by some of these so-called mobility experts, which overall I think harms the credibility of the mobile technology market. So we believe, and I'm sure some of the other vendors in this space also believe, that the challenge is for us is to educate the customers about the technology, what it can do, what it can't do, and also to try and encourage the customers to follow a logical evaluation process, which will hopefully eliminate the vaporware vendors and also the disappointment with any solutions that they choose that does not actually meet the requirements.
So how do you do that, Neil? I mean, what's the process? What would you encourage somebody to do to really weed out those that have an appropriate solution and those that are really promoting services?
Well, it's a good question, and, you know, we're sitting in a world full of information, and there's so many great points and so many great websites like your own where a customer can do his own analysis and his own research.
Okay.
So we advocate that we would prefer if the customers did not go to the top system integrators or the top analysts. They actually did some of the research analysis on their own and come up with a list of potential vendors who could provide a mobile solution.
Okay.
The next step would be to go through a complete RFP process, set out your questions, and again, ask people like yourself, what should I be asking of these vendors? What should I be looking for? Go through a complete RFP process, kind of tune the number of vendors down, and then bring them all in for proof of concept. And
so you're advocating a very logical process that lines up everybody side by side and then do a real-life proof of concept with each of these guys. And is that what you're advocating, Neil?
Definitely. And I think the further step is when you get to the proof of concept, to go to each of the vendors and say, nominate 3 customers who are using this application today that they can go out and talk to and understand the experience, the deployment, the cost, and how flexible their solution is. And if they follow that process, I think it's probably going to save them a lot of time in the future.
That's interesting because I know most vendors don't want their prospects following an RFP process. They would rather just get them in a corner and have them do business with them alone. But you're advocating put them all on the table and do a side-by-side comparison in a real-life environment. That's brave of you, Neil.
Well, I think it's right for the customer and understand that vendors don't want the competition. But at the end of the day, it's what the customer needs, and we need to ensure that they pick the right solution.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for that, Neil. So how are enterprise mobility implementations different from, say, other typical IT projects in your opinion?
Well, if I go back into my days of IBM, I used to look at projects, and the developers and engineers would develop the project based on the functionality objectives. And, of course, they would have a timeline and a schedule. And if they could think about how the look and feel, or they could do something about the look and feel at the very end of the project, that was as much the user interface capability they would consider. It was all about making it work. How it looked didn't really matter. In mobility, you know, it's all about the applications. It's all about the look and feel, the ease of use. So this type of project is, in some cases, we're working with customers who really don't are not that concerned about the interface and integration to the back end. They are only interested in how the application looks on their mobile phones. We want it to look sexy. It's a very common phrase that we hear.
Okay, but so I've been debating this internally, and matter of fact, I'm writing an article about it now. How important is the user interface? Because if it wasn't that much of a concern on a desktop, why is that different than a mobile device? Why not have a green screen and just go through a menu?
Well, a couple of good answers, I think, to that one. I think that we are now different from where we used to be when we used green screens. We didn't have these sexy applications running on our personal devices outside of work. So I think that the requirements from the consumer, who is also the consumer in an enterprise environment, are demanding that they have a good user interface. Plus, some of these mobile applications that they're using out in the field, you've got these big engineers with huge fingers with gloves on. There's no way that they're going to, go through these green screens and user interfaces that are just not easy to operate and manage.
Got it. So, it's a really interesting mode how the influence of our consumer devices are impacting now how we have to create our enterprise mobile applications. Fascinating. I'm really watching that very closely to see how different companies handle that. The next question I'd like to ask you is, what do companies fail to plan for when they're implementing mobility? Things they might not think about until it's too late.
Well, one of the common things that we have found is that a lot of companies decide that they will allow their users to use all their mobile devices. So they'll have Android, they'll have iPhone, they'll have BlackBerry, they'll have laptops.
Okay.
And I think what they fail to consider and take into account when they're doing the planning is the constant change of the operating systems, the updates to their applications. And they really need to understand that when they bring in so many different devices, they will be consistently doing changes across the network. So they have to think about how they're going to manage these changes, how they're going to do upgrades, how they're going to pass out all the new information to the mobile devices.
Oh, yeah. When I look at that, and I've had a lot of experience in that area myself, it can be a nightmare within months of starting. Because just when you're getting one app deployed, all of a sudden the operating system changes. The device you used in your prototype is now no longer the device sold in the stores. Everything can change. So how does somebody resolve that, Neil?
I think by doing a good strategy at the beginning, they have to look at how these devices, if they start considering the rapid change of the devices currently now and what it's going to be in the next 12 to 24 months, and they limit the number of devices on their network, I think it's probably going to be the best way to manage it, unless they have a complete device management strategy in place that they can manage this. Otherwise, I would limit the number of devices for a company moving into mobility at the beginning.
Devices and operating systems. Is that
yes, definitely.
What you're promoting?
Definitely.
Okay.